The Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. So this is a story that happened on the day of the resurrection. And so if you look up above, it says on verse 8, as they returned from the tomb, they told these things to the 11, to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene. And so this is the story of the resurrection. So this is the day of the resurrection, okay? And then we continue back with the story. So would anyone like to read part of the story? Or I can read it if you want. So they went to the tomb and they didn't find him. And then these events started happening. So what happened is, on verse 13, now that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus. So the two of them were walking about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. And as they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. Okay? And I don't really understand what that means, kept from recognizing him, but we know they did not recognize him. Why exactly? Was God blocking their vision? They didn't see, they didn't understand? We don't know. So we have this image, right? These two disciples are walking, and Christ just walks up alongside them, and now they just enter into a conversation, and they don't know who he is. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, imagine they're walking and they stood still. They stopped walking. Their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the thing that has happened there in these days?" And so he's like, bro, are you out of it? Don't you have Instagram? Aren't you following what's going on? And the person says, "What things?" he asked. This is Christ. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see Jesus." So now they're trying to piece this all together, right? They're confused. They're saying, they went to the Marys went to the tomb. They didn't see anything. The disciples went and checked out the story. They didn't see anything. And now we're trying to piece it all together. And of course, they're starting to remember some of the things that maybe he said before, when he said, I will rise up in 3 days, and this temple will be, destroyed and rebuilt in 3 days, etc. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" So he's reminding them that the prophets said the Messiah has to suffer. And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. So he gives them a talk, and he explains to them the story. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he was going further, but they urged him, saying strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. And as soon as he did that, what happened? Their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. So it's kind of quite a miraculous thing, right? All of a sudden they see him, they realize, oh, this is Jesus, and then he disappears. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" So now they're remembering as he was talking. They're like, yeah, I felt something. Our hearts were burning, and they're kind of figuring this out with themselves. They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them. Why is there only 11? Assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." Then the two told what has happened on the way, and when Jesus was recognized by them, how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread. Okay, so I want to talk about this story. First thing when we think about the story is actually just kind of stepping back. The structure of our liturgy follows this story. The structure of our liturgy follows this story. It actually is based on this story. How so? We have two parts to our liturgy, don't we? We have something called the liturgy of the Word and the liturgy of the believers, right? The liturgy of the Word is when we read the Pauline, the Catholic, the readings of the church, the gospel, the sermon. And so there we sort of feast on God the Word as the scripture, it's the Bible. And then after that, we start the liturgy of the believers, where we feast on God the Word as the Eucharist. Okay? And if you notice in this story, those two pieces are there in the same order. First, Christ explains all the prophecies, starting with Moses, all about the Messiah. He teaches them, right? The teaching part of the liturgy is the liturgy of the catechumens. And then after that, he breaks bread. And as soon as he breaks bread, their eyes are open. Because he broke bread probably the same way he broke bread the night of the Last Supper. And as soon as he did that, they recognized him and they saw him. They actually saw who he was. So in the first part, they heard about the Messiah. And they learned about all the prophets and all the things. But then in the second part, they saw the Messiah. They saw him through the Eucharist. Okay, so that's just kind of a side note. So I want to talk about this encounter with Jesus as really a story of, I want to think about it in psychological terms, if you will. Because in it, we learn a lot about the way Christ was the perfect human. And as the perfect human, he was also the perfect therapist. He was the perfect friend. He was the perfect person. So in the beginning of the story, and we can kind of go back and read the story a little bit, what did the disciples do? They started telling him the story, right? And so what you find is that these disciples are basically in trauma, right? They put 3.5 years of their life into this guy. They followed him around. They did what he said. They withstood persecution from the Pharisees, right? They had all their hopes in him. He's the Messiah. He's the one who's going to do all the things. And for 3.5 years, they believed in somebody. Now, can you imagine the shock of watching him killed? And like everything you did, just out the door. All that time you spent, all that effort you put in, all that walking around and sleepless nights, all that stuff is just gone. And that is a very traumatic event. That's tough. And so you see that they're like these trauma survivors, they're replaying this painful story with no resolution. They told them all about it. They're venting. And they're getting this story out. And that's exactly the state that the disciples are in. They're in a state of trauma. And so then what happens? Jesus starts walking with them very calmly. And this is the part where we want to focus, because here we can learn how to be better friends, better Christians, better people. And at first, he's walking with them unrecognized. And this is very important, which means he's walking very subtly, right? He just starts walking along. And in fact, I love this verse 19. And they said, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened?" And he says, "What things?" So what's he doing? He's asking them, "Tell me the story." What's he doing? He's listening. And I have to say, we're really not good at listening. We love to talk. We love to give people advice. We love to tell them what to do, especially young people. As soon as one young person confides in another young person, man, that other young person is really just full of all kinds of advice. Here's what you got to do. This is what you're doing wrong, bro. This is what, you got to stop this, right? And people are really confident in their very, very bad advice, right? And they give it very confidently. And I've heard the worst advice said with the most confident tone you can imagine. And so what Christ does is instead of saying, you guys, what are you doing, blah, 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 he says, what things? And he lets them talk, right? And, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? So the ratio should at least be 2 to 1. I prefer 4 to 1. Listen 4 times as much as you talk, right? Try to make it so that the other person has to ask you what you think. Because sometimes we're just a little too quick to jump in with our opinions, especially when it comes to God, right? Because, when someone tells you, I've got a problem, and you say, why, and they ask you, why did God do that? Now, of course, that's not a good question, right? Because you're not God. So I'm asking Abanub over here, who's 19, why did God do this? Now, Abanub is not God, right? So it's kind of silly for me to ask Abanub, but okay, I'm going to ask Abanub. And what does Abanub do? He says, well, since I know God, and I practically am God, I'm going to go ahead and tell you why God did this, right? God did this because you're bad. God did this because you're this. God did this because of this. And he tells you all about what God was thinking. I guess God's talking to Abanub directly. I'm not sure, right? And we have a lot of Abanubs out there. Sorry if anyone's name is Abanub. I'm just picked it can be Mina, whatever you want, right? We'll pick Daniel. Yallah, let's pick Daniel. That fits, right? So, there's just a lot of Abanubs out there. And if you guys remember the story of Job, right? Remember Job? He had all those bad things happen to him, okay? And the very beginning, Job was fine with it. Job said something beautiful in the beginning. He said, what? He said, naked I came out of my mother's womb, naked I shall return. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord, right? He was in a good place. He was fine with it. And then what happened? Abanub showed up. Right? Abanub showed up. There's 3 Abanubs who showed up. And they weren't called Abanub in the story, but they might as well have been. Abanub, Mina, and Menkerios. I don't know, right? And they started telling him why Job is bad, why God did this. And they started defending God and attacking Job. And even though Job used to be good, he wasn't good after that. After his friends talked to him, he started getting mad at God. Right? And so this is something we do a lot of, is we start telling everybody about what God's doing and why God's doing it. And as soon as you find yourself in the business of explaining why God did something, you should be pretty confident that you actually don't know the answer, right? When you start a sentence with, let me tell you why God did this, then you have reduced infinity to a caricature, right? Some little idol, some little toy that, you push the button and then the button says, oh, I did this to make you better. I did this because of the future. I did this, right? Because God is infinite, right? And there's kind of no way you're going to know. So Jesus walks with them and he just listens and he becomes a safe presence for them, right? And when he listens, he understands. Now, there's a very important aspect of psychology that all of you should know. And it's really something that Christ himself embodied, which is nobody will listen to you if they don't think you get them, right? If they don't think you understand, if you don't understand me, then I'm really not going to listen to you. Especially if you just start barking orders at me, right? Every once in a while you'll engage with like a teenager who's doing something really dumb, okay? And you can even tell him, like I've had these encounters at church. I'm like, what are you doing? Habibi, what are you doing? Something, he's hitting the wall with a hammer or something. People do this at church, right? Kids love to do this stuff. And you go, don't do that. That's wrong. And I'm fairly confident I'm right. It's wrong to hit the wall with a hammer. And you could have a kid look right back at you in the eye and say, you don't even know my name. You don't even know me. And I'm like, what does that have to do with hitting the wall with a hammer? But he's got a point. I don't know him. And he's pointing that out to me. You have no right to reproach me, to reprove me, because you don't know me. Get to know me first. Now, kids will say stuff like that, but they sort of have a point. We do this as adults. We like to jump in just a little bit too quickly. Like one of my favorite examples is the story of the the sinful woman. Here's a woman who's caught in adultery and they're about to stone her to death and all the bad things. And then what does Jesus do? First of all, he saves her life. And he does it without any judgment. And he makes the people who are going to kill her go away. And he does it with total love. And then, and then at that point, she looks up at him. And at this point, she's thinking, I would do anything for this guy. This guy just saved my life. And he did it in the nicest possible way. And at this point, she's what? If you had to pick a word. She's a Christian. She's now a follower of Christ. And at that point, what does Jesus say to her? Go and sin no more. He didn't start with go and sin no more. You don't start like that. However, we tend to start like that. We start with go and sin no more. That's wrong. What's your name again? Oh, I don't care about your name. That's wrong. That's a sin. And we love to tell people to go and sin no more before we put in the work. And Christ, he did the opposite, didn't he? He put in the work. He got to know her as quickly as he could. He saved her life. He interacted with her. He probably looked at her more lovingly than anyone's ever looked at her in her life. And then he said that to her. And that order is very, very important. And so sometimes as Christians, and we want to help and we want to be good and we want people to be, all the things. So we jump in and we say, God's doing this and this is what's happening and this is about... Before we listen, before we get to know the person, before we understand the situation, and we're shooting off advice. In fact, we can't wait for that other person to stop talking so that I can tell them what I think. Because they're just getting in the way right now. They're just talking blah, 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 blah. I don't really care what anyone has to say. I got stuff to say. And so the beauty here is watching Jesus say to them, so what happened? And he lets them talk. Again, he's the perfect, if you want to use the word psychologist, therapist, perfect human, perfect friend. And then telling the story. They shared the story and their pain. And this is the first step in processing trauma. This is the first step in processing what happened. They had to say it out loud. We followed this guy. We thought he was the Messiah. And he let him talk. But that's important to process your own trauma, to let someone else process their trauma, to process and experience, anything. Someone gets a flat tire on the side of the freeway, and then you show up. Let him tell you what happened. Well, the car started jiggling and the wheel was blah, 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 and so I had to put the hazard lights on, but then there was a truck coming, so I had to pull over really slowly. And okay, let's call AAA. No. I want to hear the story. Let him tell the story. Let him process. Let him talk. Don't cut people off. And so he tells the story, lets them tell the story. And they thought, we thought this guy was the Messiah, and we thought. And then, after he's listened, after he's convinced them, I understand you. And not just I understand you, I see you. And this is very important, to be seen. This is what all of us want in our lives, to love and to be loved, to be seen by somebody, to be understood by somebody. The story of Simon the Pharisee and the sinful woman. You guys know the story? Yes? Does anyone read the Bible when they were little? Did anyone's parents read the Bible to them when they were little? So you guys know the story of Simon and the sinful woman? So Jesus was in a house, and then he's with Simon the Pharisee, and the sinful woman came in and she started crying on his feet and washing them with the tears and drying them with her hair and anointing his feet with fragrant oil. You guys know this story now? Okay. What did Jesus say to Simon? When Simon had this thought, if Jesus knew what kind of manner of woman this was, he would not let her touch him. Simon had this thought. Huh? before he said leave her, he said a little word out of nowhere, and you're just like, that's a weird thing to say. He said, Simon, do you see this woman? She is washing my feet with her tears, but you haven't washed my feet when I came in. She put perfume on my feet, but you didn't give me perfume for my head. But before he said that, he said, do you see this woman? Isn't that strange? How big do you think Simon's living room was back in the day? It's like this big, right? It's not a big house. Okay, so I'm sitting in this tiny little living room. It's the size of this table. And this woman barges into my house, is crying and all over Christ. And I mean, if someone walks in your house and starts into your little room and starts crying, you know they're there. Why did Jesus say, do you see this woman? It's a weird question. Of course I see her. She's right there. There's only 3 of us in this tiny little room. And this woman's screaming. Of course I see her. Is that what he's asking? Or is he asking, do you see her? Do you actually see who she is? Do you see her thoughts? Do you see her heart? Or is she just a sinner to you? Do you know who this person is? And so Christ is trying to humanize this woman to Simon. He's saying, you have to know who these are. This is my daughter. It's not just some sinful woman who's in the neighborhood. It's my daughter. So we're called to see people. And this is the beauty of what Christ did and how he taught us. He would see people and get them. And when he looked at them, they knew he understood them. And so in this case, these 2 disciples talked. He listened. And at this point, they're like, okay, this guy, whoever he is, he gets us. He gets what happened. He gets my grief. He gets my trauma. He understands what went wrong. He understands why I'm disappointed. He understands what should have happened. He gets it. Right? And basic humanity will tell you that unless someone gets you, you're not going to listen very much to them. But then what did he do right after that? That's when he said this great, sorry, my phone keeps sleeping. Verse 25. Then he said to them, O foolish ones and slow of heart to believe in all that the prophets have spoken. Ought not the Christ have suffered these? So now he digs into them. Can he do that? He can do that. Why? Because he followed basic principles of humanity. He listened. He comprehended. They dealt with their trauma. And now he's doing something called reframing the truth. He's going to say, I see what you're saying, but now I want you to see the same set of facts differently. And he told them the Messiah is supposed to suffer. All these things are supposed to happen. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory? And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he re-explained to them what was said in the scriptures concerning himself. So this is called reframing the truth. This isn't telling them they're just wrong. It's I listen, I understand, and then I say, now let me tell you how I see it. Okay? And when someone has been listened to and understood, they will accept that reframing of the truth. So Jesus helps reinterpret the story through a lens of hope and purpose. And this is what we're called to do as Christian friends. Reinterpret the story through a lens of hope and purpose. Right? This is maybe why these things happen, or this is how I'm seeing it. And then the question is, did it work? Well, the answer happens after he breaks bread and they see that it was Christ. And then they go back and they start replaying the story. And this is called emotional resonance. It resonated. They said, were not our hearts burning? And they're like, yeah, I felt a tingle. Something was going on when he was speaking. And so one of the things that we learn from dealing with trauma is it's deeply emotional, not just intellectual. You can't convince someone who's dealt with trauma that it's fine. you're fine. Everything's fine. Telling them it's fine hundreds of times is not going to make it fine. That's not how we deal with it. It has to be dealt with emotionally. And they realized that as they were talking, that our hearts were burning. We were having an emotional response. As he was reframing the story, they realized, yeah, I was emotionally attached to him, and the way he was reframing it and the way he reframed it made me feel better, which is always a good sign. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is recognition in the relationship. So healing often happens in moments of connection, safety, and love. Once again, as Christians, as Christian friends, we have to realize that the only place people will heal is in safety, connection, and love. Okay, now let's think about what I just said. The only place people will heal. What is this place? I want a better word. I know it's church. Yeah, I just heard it. Huh? What is this place? What does St. John Chrysostom call this place? Just say anything. You can be wrong. This is a safe place. It's okay. It's a hospital. Thank you. Right? So this place is a hospital. So what do you do in a hospital? You come to heal. And we just said that healing has to happen in places of connection, safety, and love. Which means if I am to come to this place and heal, this place has to be what? A place of connection, safety, and love. Which means that when I sit in my Father's house, I'm not scared. I'm not scared of being judged. I'm not scared of being attacked. This is my house. This is my dad's house. Nothing can hurt me here. Right? And this is the way we should model our homes, by the way. You know, when you guys become parents and you get old, like me, the home should be a place that's safe. You know, all the attacking and the bad mouthing and all that can happen outside. But my kids should know that when they come home, this is a safe place. Right? We don't get attacked here. We don't attack each other here. This is where we're safe. The church should be that place. The church should be the place where I come and I know the person I'm going to talk to isn't going to turn on me, isn't going to judge me, isn't going to talk about me. Right? And in fact, when we look at the way the church community was in the early church, St. James says something very interesting. He says, confess your sins to whom? Confess your sins to one another. You all know that in the early days, confession was what? Public, right? You would sit in the church and you would confess your sins. And all of you were like, my God, no way. Absolutely not, never. Right? Why are you reacting like that? Because people will talk about me, people will judge me, people will blah, 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 blah. What if they don't? What if they didn't? I mean, don't you have friends that you can talk to about anything? That you can tell them your secrets? And you're not worried about them judging you or whatever? So one of an example I heard that I really liked is, someone said the church should be like an AA meeting. You guys ever been to an AA meeting? You should go sometime. So an AA meeting is Alcoholics Anonymous. You sit in a circle with a bunch of other alcoholics. And you say, hi, I'm Archdeacon Mark Solomon. I'm an alcoholic. That just rolled off my tongue. And they say, hi, Archdeacon Mark Solomon. I'm an alcoholic too. So we all sit in a circle. And the first thing we say is, I'm an alcoholic. And everyone says, I'm also an alcoholic. And I heard a priest one time say, that's the way church should be. Like a big AA meeting. Does anyone go to the AA meeting scared to admit they're an alcoholic? No, that's why you go, right? And why are you not scared to admit you're an alcoholic? Because everyone else is an alcoholic, right? I mean, if anyone says, I can't believe you're an alcoholic, you're like, well, you're an alcoholic too, bro. Like, that's why you're here. No one's going to say, You're an alcoholic? What? Right? So that's a safe place. Everyone's an alcoholic. Works great. So I come to church and everybody's what? A sinner. Everyone's sick. Right? So I should be able to sit in a circle. Now maybe you're disease, you got cancer and I got something else. I got heart disease and I got a tumor and this person has that and this person has whatever. But we should be able to sit in a circle and say, oh, what you in for? What do you got? I mean, you could do that. Couldn't you go to the emergency room? You know, at Hoag or whatever hospital you want to go to, you just walk around the emergency room and ask people, what are you here for? They may tell you. Because everyone's here for something. So the church needs to be this safe place. A place of safety, connection, and love. I especially like the way, everyone heard of Homeboy Industries, the way their kind of tagline is safe, seen, and cherished. Safe, seen, and cherished. And I always thought to myself, that should be the motto of every church. Here, you are safe, you are seen, and you are cherished and loved. And that's where healing can take place. And so Jesus, very quickly on that road, on that very short walk, he created that environment for them. He created an environment of safety, being seen, being loved. And even then, when he pushed back and said, you guys are fools, they didn't get upset. They're kind of like, yeah, you're right. This guy makes a good point. Okay. And then the final point is empowerment and mission. So once he switches the narrative in their head, now it moves from a story of defeat and, this guy was supposed to be the Messiah and then they killed him and now our lives are over and it's all, all black and sadness and, it's all, not good. After he reframes the story and says, no, the Messiah is supposed to suffer. And once this narrative is reordered in their head, Jesus breaks bread. This is the communion, intimacy. And now he's ready. They're ready to act and bring hope to others. And this is my final point. Communion is supposed to do that. Right? Communion should be all about creating light and life in me that I then give to other people. So one of my favorite quotes that I heard about the liturgy, when someone one time asked a priest and says, when does the liturgy end? When does liturgy begin? And Abuna said, the liturgy begins when we leave the church. The liturgy begins when we leave the church. So what does that mean? That means whenever I have an encounter with Christ, and I take him, and he shows me mercy, and he shows me forgiveness, and he shows me love, it's very hard for me not to do that to my fellow man. Is that right? I mean, if you're abused as a child, you're abusive as a parent, but if you're loved as a child, you're loving as a parent. And so if I'm loved in church, and I feel God's love, shouldn't I then go and be loving? Should that be the whole point of the liturgy? So for me, the liturgy is like the story of the Samaritan woman. You all know the story of the Samaritan woman, right? What do we call the Eucharist? Don't we call it the fountain of life? Right? So isn't that the Eucharist? And so when I look at the story of the Samaritan woman, this woman goes to water, a well, and it's just a dead well. It's just regular water. And Jesus even calls that water what it is. He says, if you drink of this water, then what? You'll thirst again. And then he reframes it and he says, no, I'm going to give you something different. I'm going to give you living water. So when you put Christ next to the well becomes living water, the fountain of life. Right? Just like any fountain that produces water. So what does she do? This is just the story of liturgy every single Sunday. She goes and she takes from the living water, and then what happens? Big change, right? All of a sudden, she's a different person. And she preaches to her whole city. She goes out and she becomes light. And so this has to be our model as Christians always. Whenever we leave the liturgy, we have to leave different. And now it's time to be the light of the world and the salt of the earth. Evangelos, at the Coptic Club retreat last year, he gave this really nice example. He said, if you have this salt, and it's really good salt, you get the Himalayan salt from Costco, you guys know the one with the grinder, and then you take it and you put it up in the cabinet, in your cabinet, right? And then you've got this pot of food that's bland. You can have as much Himalayan salt as you want in the counter, but you got to put it on the food, or the food doesn't get salted, right? Having all this salt stored up doesn't help. And he said sometimes as Christians we store up all the salt and the light and we keep it to ourselves. And he's like, no, you're supposed to be the light of the world, salt of the earth. You got to go salt everybody. You got to go be light to everybody. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they put a light lamp and put it under a basket, light a lamp and put it under a basket. We're not supposed to be the light of the church. We're supposed to be the light of the world. And you see that when they had this encounter with Christ, what's the first thing they did? They went running back to the 11 and said, oh, Jesus is resurrected. We saw him. We felt him. Our hearts burned. The story's true. They're preachers, missionaries to their own apostles. So the church has to be like this every single Sunday. We have to come. We have to receive forgiveness. And then what do we got to do? We got to go forgive. Because if you receive forgiveness and you don't give forgiveness, you're a thief. You took, but you didn't give. And if you receive mercy and you don't give mercy to people, it's no good. And you receive love and you don't give love, that's no good. Right? And the commandment that Christ said, the thing he said was, love God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself. It's just two things. It's really simple. Easy to memorize. You love God, you take his love, and then you give it to everybody else. And really, this is the mission of Christianity. Take and then give. And so we see this in the encounter with the two disciples. When they took from Christ, they immediately became missionaries for him, about him. And so when I see that I'm not a missionary, when I see that I don't really care, when I see that I don't really want to talk about God, I'm not interested in talking about it, or even, something's wrong. You must not be taking. Because if you took, you'd be crazy town. Right? I mean, the Samaritan woman, how long was he with her? 20 minutes? 10 minutes? And yet, she left different person. How many thousands of hours have I spent at church and not left a different person? Is it possible to come all the way to the Eucharist, engage with the Eucharist, and leave empty? Let's think about the story I just told you about Simon and the sinful woman. So Simon the Pharisee invites Jesus to his house, and then the sinful woman comes in, and she cries, and she wipes her tears, her tears with her hair, and she pours fragrant ointment on his feet. And then Jesus says something to him. He says, this woman whose sins are many are forgiven, because he who loves much, he who is forgiven much, loves much. So, when I think of this icon, I don't know if can you type in icon of sinful woman and Simon and see what you get. Coptic icon. Sinful, dinful.
This keyboard sucks.
Yeah, it sucks. There you go. Let's see what you get. Woman. I didn't need them. Okay, that's good, Ed. Let's see what you get. There it is. Okay, click on anyone. Pick your favorite. Make it big. Okay. This is one of my favorite icons because it's very compact. Okay, we can do it that way. Right? So in the icon, there's only three figures. It's Christ, Simon the Pharisee, and the sinful woman. There's three people. And every time I see an icon with Christ in it, and Christ is in the middle, what is this scene of? This is church. Right? Whenever people are gathered around Jesus, I think to myself, that sounds like church. Right? So now I'm at church, and there's two people, and they're both right on, with Jesus. They're both talking to Jesus, but one person, that woman, gets everything. And the other guy gets nothing. Is that possible? Is that possible that I can meet Christ, have him come in my house, sit on my couch, and then get nothing? Is it possible for me to come and take the Eucharist and get nothing? Sure, happens every Sunday. Every Sunday, two people go up to communion. One person gets everything, and the person behind them gets nothing. St. Paul even takes it another step further. He says, you can eat and drink the body of the Lord and bring condemnation to yourself when you take it unworthily. So forget nothing. You can go negative. So every Sunday this happens. Two people show up just like that. One guy gets everything and one guy gets nothing. Every Sunday. This is what happens. And so when I take everything, I have to change. The Samaritan woman changed. Every person who encountered Christ changed. So that's the measure of whether or not you got something. Do I come out changed, or is it just the same like I walked in? And if I really met Christ, is it possible to really meet Christ and come away the same? I mean, if you met a famous basketball player, you'd be like, man, I'm never going to think of basketball the same again. All right, I met Michael Jordan, and he's just a guy. If you actually met Christ, can you come away the same? Possible. You have to come away changed. So this is the measure of our encounter. All right, so let's take it back to all the things we talked about. This encounter with Christ, we see in what he did and the way he handled the disciples and how he brought them very slowly. He let them talk. He let them vent. He asked them questions. He listened. He saw them. He understood what they were saying. Then he redirected their truth. He helped them understand more. Because they felt seen and cherished and heard and safe, they're like, oh, okay, they accepted what this guy said. And then he revealed himself to them. And then they realized there was an emotional healing as well. And when they encountered Christ, they became missionaries and evangelists. So what does this have to do with the resurrection? As we encounter the resurrection, and the whole point of the 50 days is to encounter the resurrection and to feel the resurrection, I hope that after the resurrection and encountering Christ and the resurrected Christ, we come away different. We come away as evangelists. We come away as missionaries. We come away on fire. We leave the church. The liturgy begins. The liturgy starts when we leave the church. We become light and life. And that's why the church did what? Right after this period of 50 days, when I find Christ and I find the resurrected Christ, what do we do right after that? We celebrate the apostles. Then we engage in the apostles' fast. Why? Because now we're supposed to be missionaries. Now we're supposed to be servants. Now we have Christ. And now it's time as a season to say, I'm going to focus on my service. So I encourage all of you during the Apostles' Fast, it isn't just the all-you-can-eat sushi fast, right? Which I know is nice, okay? And you can go, man, I'm so holy and religious. I had lobster 4 times this week. Look at me. Which is wonderful in its own right. That's sarcastic, in case you're wondering. Let's make it more than the all-you-can-eat sushi fast. Let's try to make the Apostles' Fast a time of service. Devote it to some particular service in your life, right? Something at the church, a missionary work, helping the poor. visiting people in the hospital, cooking for people who are pregnant. Find something and then do something, right? And devote that fast and that time to that kind of service. All right, that's all I have. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Criticisms, complaints? Not all at once. No, raise your hand first, please. Don't just yell out.